This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should, too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida.
This is
Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here, my friend. Coming up on this week's show, a review of Holland America's Koningsdam on a 7-night Southeast Alaska sailing out of Vancouver. And as always, staff writer Richard Sims is here with Cruise News. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug Parker.
So we start things off with a story that got some cruise passengers worried about the safety of drinking water on board.
You know, one of the first questions people always have when they're thinking about taking a cruise and maybe they're, doing it for the first time, they ask about the water on board and is it safe to drink? They generally mean the water coming from the sink, which, by the way, yes, is 100% safe to drink. But in the case of this next story, they're actually talking about the bottled water that you find in your room. You go in and there's 2 or 3 bottles of water there, whether you ordered it or not, and they're not free. They're usually around, $4 or $5, depending on the cruise line, for each bottle. A TikToker made a video a few months back in which they took one of the sealed bottles of water that was in their Carnival stateroom. It's Carnival branded water. They drank it, and then they basically were trying to say it's a money-saving hack if you take that bottle, refill it, and use a little glue to reseal the cap so that if somebody picks it up and twists it, it feels like it's a new brand of water, because they break that seal. Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, if you have to save money by doing something as skeezy as that, then maybe you shouldn't be going on a cruise in the first place. But I digress. The video went crazy popular and, it got a lot of commentary. Eventually, it came to the attention of Carnival Cruise Line, and Carnival very wisely sort of issued a lifetime ban where the TikToker was concerned. But people still have a lot of questions because it raised concerns for them about, what if somebody else comes? What if other people on board start doing this? What if a copycat of some sort decides to do this, but instead of just putting water in it, they put, drops in it of some sort, chemicals or a poison or something. It's easy to say, oh my God, you're being so paranoid, but this is the world we live in now, bad things happen and there are lots of people out there always looking to do bad things. I will say that when I order bottled water on board, I usually do order like a case of bottled water to be delivered to my room. And generally speaking, those are delivered as a full case wrapped in plastic, which means, you know that is safe and that nobody has tampered with it. But yeah, I don't know, Doug, do you think it's a real concern? Do you think that this is something people should even give thought to? Or is it just you've got enough to worry about? Don't take that on too.
I don't know. So I will say this. In 2013, I was on a new ship launch. I'm not going to say it wasn't Carnival. I'll say that much. And I overheard people at the bar talking about that they resealed their water bottles. So this is a thing that's been happening for a while, right? So ever since I've heard that conversation, I will drink the ice bucket water out of my room or the tap water before I open one of those bottles of water in my room. I just refuse to do it.
I do love the ice bucket water. I do that every day. I ask for a bucket of ice, and by the end of the day, it's nice and melting. You got this nice, cool water. I love that. But again, I don't understand who these people are. Do they really need to save money that badly that $5-10 worth of water they're going to put other people at risk and do something skanky like this to save $10? Who are these people?
I agree, man. It's just the world we live in. So we'll move on here and say we have an update on the situation in Juneau, man. They always have something in Juneau. So this time they've been trying to figure out how to deal with a huge increase of cruise passengers, but it looks like we have more to this story.
Yeah. So last week we told you about new regulations going into effect, which will, beginning in 2026, it'll put a cap on the number of daily cruise passengers allowed to visit Juneau. Now, this isn't completely unexpected. We've been hearing about over-tourism in various places in general, and we know that there are more ships than ever going to Alaska. And this is kind of a gentle environment that we want to be protective of. Although the real cause of the concern here in Juneau is not really about the environment necessarily. It's more about the town itself and the infrastructure and people feeling like, oh my God, there are so many of you cruise passengers passengers. Please give us a break. Which creates this dynamic in town where you have half the town who welcomes the cruise passengers because it's money in their pockets. They run local businesses. And the other half who are like, no, this is too much. It's gotten out of control. So starting in 2026, this new rule will go in effect. It'll allow 16,000 passengers to visit every day except Sunday, where the number will be reduced to 12,000. But we also told you last week that there was another group out there for whom this wasn't quite enough. They wanted to take it a little bit further and say there will be no cruise ships on Saturday. We will get a break on Saturday and weirdly also on July 4th. Now, in order to get this on the ballot, they needed to get 2,359 signatures, which is a weirdly specific number. And that was what they needed, 2,359 signatures to get this on the ballot. They ended up about 300 shy of that. So they had 60 days to get these signatures starting on April 10th, which if you do the math, 60 days, June 10th, that's now. They didn't meet the goal, but for some reason that I don't quite understand, I've read several articles on this and it hasn't really been explained to me. They're being given, a few extra days. They have basically another week to get these signatures in order to try and get it on the ballot. But it's not sounding at this point as if they will make that goal. In either case, I suspect that next week we'll have the next chapter of this continuing saga as we find out whether or not they made their goal.
Yeah, it's hard for me to weigh in because I don't live there.
It's interesting because, I live in a tourist town. I live in Woodstock, New York. And this is a town that is very, very, very dependent on tourism. And we see this exact same thing. There are a lot of people who have lived here for many years who despise the tourists. They do not go into town on weekends because it's just flooded with tourists. But at the same time, if you took those tourists away, the town would wither up and die. So it is, it's not just in cruise towns, it's all over that we see this dichotomy between, when you live in an area that is very dependent on cruise dollars. Always reminds me of the movie Jaws. You remember the reason they didn't want to shut the beach was Amity needs summer dollars. And that's sort of how these same towns are.
And over in Italy, a potentially dangerous situation was dealt with quickly by the ship's crew.
We're talking about the MSC Armonia, which was just outside Venice when alarms went off indicating there was a fire. Now, anybody who's ever attended a safety drill, which should be everybody listening probably, knows that one of the things they always say in there is that fire is one of the worst things that can happen on a cruise ship. For obvious reasons, you're in the middle of the ocean, a fire is a very bad thing. In this case, it was a small electrical fire of some type that started in the laundry room. The crew was able to very quickly extinguish it. There was no major damage to the ship. Nobody was harmed. A Coast Guard patrol boat with a firefighting team was dispatched to the ship, but it sounds as if by the time they got there, the fire was already out. The crew who put out the fire were examined, and there was an investigation underway, which is normal under these circumstances. Ultimately, this is one of those stories where something that could have been really, really bad turned out not to be a big deal at all, because as we've seen before, the crews of a cruise ship are very, very well trained, especially when it comes to dealing with fire. I think almost every cruise I've been on at some point when we're in port, I often stay on ship when the ship is in port. And that is usually when they will do drills. And they almost always, on almost every cruise I've ever done, there at some point is a fire drill being done by the crew. They know how important this is, and they're really good at handling it. So potentially bad situation that ultimately was next to nothing, really.
And Disney Cruise Line guests are getting their first peek at Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, and at least two areas have revealed some criticism.
Disney typically does this kind of thing really, really well. They're great at theming, whether it's in the parks or their cruise ships. Look at Castaway Cay, which was their original island destination, wildly popular. Similarly, this new experience, which is in Nassau, offers pretty much everything Disney guests want. You've got, there's a Junkanoo parade featuring Mickey, Minnie, and the other, characters in colorful costumes. They've got food venues, which we'll talk more about in a minute. They've got sandy beaches. There's even an adults-only beach, which when you're on a Disney cruise could be very crucial to saving your sanity because obviously there are a lot of kids on that ship. So whether you're a Disney adult who is sailing by themselves Or you're sailing with your family, but you want some time away from them on an adults only place. This is, there is a place there to head. But there's also a couple things that some of the initial guests have complained about and videotaped and been talking about. The first is it's a really long walk from the pier to Castaway Cay itself, or to Lookout Cay itself. It's over a half mile, which there doesn't seem to be much in the way of any kind of protection from the sun. You're in the Bahamas. It's very hot. It's a long walk. They do have kind of like golf carts that'll run people back and forth with mobility issues. But unless they put in like a full service tram, that means most people are going to be hoofing it. The reason it's such a long walk is the pier had to be built a certain distance away from shore in order to maintain the ecosystem there in general and coral reefs in particular. That's why on a lot of private islands, like for example, if you look at Norwegian Cruise Line's Great Stirrup Cay, they do not have a pier there. They park offshore and they take tender boats in and out. Both tender boats and piers have their pros and cons. The pier, it's a long walk. With tender boats, they can lead to a bit of chaos in the whole process of getting to the island and getting back from the island. And also, they can very easily lead to cancellations because of rough weather. You got a big ship with a small little tender boat next to it, and if there's a lot of waves, it's too dangerous. The big ship could just knock over the small ship. So they tend not to tender during any kind of bad weather. The other thing that's being reported quite a bit from the new Lookout Cay is, this is a little bit nasty, but there's big giant flies all over the food area, like on the buns and on the burgers. And, part of that is just sort of, you're in the Caribbean and there are bugs and they will figure out a way to deal with it. But for right now, it seems to be kind of a little disturbing for a lot of guests. You can find videos all over the place of it, and they are big flies. These are not like the things you find in your house, or if you do, you should maybe move out of your house. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. It might be worth making sure that you put on a lot of bug spray before you get off. Maybe consider eating before you get off the ship so you don't have to worry about eating at the buffets. Obviously, it's a new destination. There's some wrinkles that are going to be worked out, and it'll be interesting to see how things evolve in the weeks and months ahead.
And Carnival Cruise Line made a couple of changes to their loyalty program that has definitely ruffled some feathers.
All you cross-stitchers out there, get your pen and paper, because I'm about to drop on you words you should put on your next pillow, and you can give it to all of your, high-ranking friends in loyalty programs, and that it will say, the loyalty program giveth, and the loyalty program taketh away. In this case, Carnival Cruise Line's brand ambassador, John Heald, who always has the unpleasant task of breaking news, and he becomes the person that everyone attacks when they don't like it. I'm sure he's paid lots of money and compensated very well for this, but there are times when I actually feel bad for him because so much hatred is directed at him as if he made these decisions himself. In this case, he had the unpleasant task of telling members of their very important fun people club or fun person club, I guess it could go either way, which is their loyalty program. He had to tell them that one of the perks was being cut, and the cut being made. Well, to understand it, you sort of have to flash back a little bit. So go back with me, if you will, to the post-pandemic restart. Cruise lines were sailing at reduced capacity, and they were doing everything they could to encourage social distancing on board. And, they were doing everything they could to make sure that nothing bad happened on board post-pandemic, because they had already been shut down for 2 years, and they knew they couldn't survive another shutdown. Well, one of the things that meant was that for a while, Carnival canceled their really popular casino tournaments. And in their place, they gave Diamond and Platinum VIFP members $25 in free play for the casino. They could use it in slots, they could use it at the tables, whatever. But now that things are back to normal and then some, given that the ships are sailing at like 105% capacity, that $25 credit is being taken away. Now, as you no doubt expect, probably predict, this created a whole lot of unhappy campers, cruisers, sorry, some of whom are basically saying, what's the point of being loyal if you're going to take things away from us? One thing Heel did say that was kind of interesting to me, and we've heard this for a while, we've heard rumors of it, but he basically confirmed that they are working on changes to the VIFP program, which will, according to him, be rolled out sometime later this year. I think he said by the end of the year. There's no word on what will change, whether, benefits will be added, benefits will be taken away. If I had to guess, I'd say probably a little bit of both. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But Doug, what are your thoughts on like loyalty programs in general and carnivals in particular?
Look, you're going to get your free laundry, your early boarding, but that's even really non-existent now. Going to your stateroom early is pretty much not really even happening that much anymore. The $25 thing, like you said, introduced at the restart, taken away, so it really wasn't like, okay, this is going to be here to stay. I do have a problem with them saying that, okay, this wasn't a Carnival thing, it was who operates our casino program, and they bragged about it in the past, for the past decade or so, that it's ran by Carnival Corporation's Global Casino Operations. That's who runs the program on all of their ships. Now, if it was an executive decision, I guess, saying from the corporate office, hey, we're pulling this from our brand, yeah, but it's still Carnival. They're acting like it's an outside party that's not letting them do this anymore, but it's really Carnival not wanting to give away that casino money.
Yeah, completely agree. We've seen this from not only Carnival, but from other lines before where, they do their best to spin it, but it's pretty easy to see through the spin. I mean, I don't have the best loyalty with Carnival. I'm like mid-level. I have reached one of the top tiers with Norwegian, and I will say that their loyalty program perks are really pretty excellent. I mean, you get free meals and free laundry and and it starts at a relatively low level. So I'm really happy with Norwegian's program, and because I've been sailing more Carnival lately, I'll be interested to see what their what they roll out and how it's different. I'll also be interested to see if anybody follows in MSC's footprints and rolls out a match program, because that match program that MSC has is fantastic.
Well, the Margaritaville at-sea Islander is sailing right now with a few select guests on board. We'll call it a shakedown or a preview cruise, and it's a bit of a mixed bag right now.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. It is a preview cruise, so that means everybody on board is an invited guest. This is not a revenue-generating cruise. The first revenue-generating cruise will be on the 14th, so it's coming up rather quickly. And I that's kind of the one that I'm really interested in the feedback on, so we will certainly be talking about this in a future episode. But for right now, there are definitely, let's just say the ship does not sound completely ready for this preview. Apparently it was raining today, and the atrium was leaking, which, never something you really want. The pools aren't ready, and the 14th is coming up quick. So these are some things that really need to be taken care of as soon as possible. I think you and I were both probably surprised to hear that they were taking on a second ship, because there was a point about a year ago where I actually thought that the line might just go under entirely after they, they had a second ship and they got rid of it, and there were a lot of problems on the one ship they had left in their fleet. So it really sounded like they were on very shaky ground. But instead, they went out, went out and got a second ship, and we'll wait to hear the full reviews on this, and then we will get back to you and let people know what the impressions are.
Yeah, a couple of friends are on board right now. Also, the toilets in the cabin was clogged, so they went to use one in a public space, and the first three public ones were clogged. They finally found the fourth one that was operational, and also the Wi-Fi is non-existent. It's happening because they're texting me, but it's like intermittent as well. And speaking of the money they've received, Sycamore Partners, which is a private equity group, they've invested a lot of money and have a controlling interest in that. So that's where they've gotten some of the funds to ramp this operation up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So Yeah, it'll be that's I'm fascinated by this because, I feel as if this next year is going to be crucial for them.
Mm-hmm.
If, because they've invested a lot of money in the new ship. They're going, they're sailing out of a different port for them. So it's very important that they make this work. I think if this does not work, then maybe we will see the end of this particular line.
And finally, instead of answering a question this week, we're going to end the show with some feedback we received from you regarding last week's story about the woman who had her $15,000 cruise canceled by some unknown person. So, Richard, we received lots and lots of comments and feedback, some quite comical, actually. What is everyone saying?
Well, for one thing, they definitely seem to fall into camps. It's not, I really thought it would all be one side. I really thought, I always think I'm right. So I kind of thought everyone would agree with me that Carnival should pony up this money and make this situation go away. But not everybody agreed with that. In fact, some thought that was the worst thing you could possibly do because it might inspire other scammers to do this, or people who, like, for whatever reason, want to cancel their cruise to do this as if someone else canceled their cruise and then call Carnival and go like, oh, I don't know how this happened, There were some other interesting questions. Like, for example, one person wrote in and wanted to know, which we don't know the answer, how this woman didn't realize that the cruise was canceled because there were like things like shore excursion fees and things like that should have been returned to her bank account, and that might have tipped them off. Now, for me personally, I shouldn't admit this, but I will. I don't keep that close an eye on things, so I might not notice immediately. I also have, like, for example, I have a cruise coming up that I have a lot of things that I've already prepaid. And if a couple of them came back, I might not necessarily notice it right away. There's also the question of exactly what the timing was as far as how soon this woman's trip was canceled. Like, how much time passed between the time when the trip was canceled and the time when she found out it was canceled? Because if you remember, she found out it was canceled when she called them to, like, make a request or something. And they were like, oh, no, your cruise has been canceled. Some people wanted to know how the woman in question spent $15,000 on a cruise. And I can tell you, not quite from personal experience, but it's pretty easy. If you want to do a first-rate cruise and you're going with your family and stuff like that, you can easily rack up $15,000 worth of bills. And remember, they were in the most expensive suite on the ship. They were in the presidential suite. So I think this might be the most email we've gotten about something in quite a while, wouldn't you say?
It was overwhelming because I try not to look at my email right when I wake up because, just like the overload of everything. And had like 24. Now, granted, I wake up pretty early. This show gets posted at 3 a.m. Eastern on Thursday morning. So by the time I woke up a couple of hours later, there was like 22, 23 emails already. Like, wow, okay. But then again, I realized people are all over the world listening to this, not just on the East Coast.
That's really true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
All right, man.
We have an international audience.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, our buddy Gary over there in Australia always checking in with us as well. So, very happy to have every single one of you. Staff writer Richard Sims, also happy to have you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Always glad to be here.
Have a question or a comment for the show?
Yeah!
Send an email or voice memo to Doug@cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
The world is constantly changing, Your place for news is still the same. Online and on demand at cruiseradio.net.
So, Doug, I think you know this, but I'm really, really excited about this particular conversation because you did a cruise that I am going to do exactly a year from now. I think the date you boarded was almost exactly the same day that I am going. So I want to get all the details. This was a 7-night Alaska cruise on the Holland America Koningsdam. So let's start with the most important thing, sort of, was did you go in a day early? We always recommend getting there a day early, especially for something like this, because you were leaving out of Vancouver. What did you do, to get ready for this?
All the airline issues lately, I wanted to make sure I did get in early, but I wanted to make sure I got in not just a day early, but early that day. So it had me leaving Jacksonville at 5 a.m. the day before. So I had to get to the airport like around 3:45, 3:30. And then I landed like right around 11 a.m. No problems. So all was good there. And then the hotel was ready when I checked in around noon or so. So got a good head start to check out Vancouver and stuff. But yeah, definitely if you're going that far, at least for me, you couldn't go any further across the country if you wanted to, or I guess across the Northwest if you wanted to, than Florida. So it was a very smart move going in early.
Well, not only that, but hadn't you just come back from another trip? I mean, you always seem to have just come back from another trip. So I can imagine you needed a little recharge before heading out on this one.
Yeah, it was Barcelona to LA, then back to Florida for 3 days, and then up here for 9 days, or up in Vancouver for 9 days in Alaska. So there was a lot of going, and it did take me about a day or two to get kind of adjusted again, but about a day and a half, I'm good to go.
So a day and a half after all of this, you head to the ship and you head to the port, and let's talk, what was your embarkation experience like?
I always read on reviews that the embark is just a disaster in Vancouver. We had 3 cruise ships there the day we left, and it was fine. We got to the pier around 11 o'clock. And one thing you do there is you clear customs. And I was actually talking to the agent about this. So you clear customs before you go on the ship. And why is that? Because you're technically going from one country to another. So you're going from Canada back to the U.S. when you board a cruise ship. So you have to clear customs from the U.S. custom folks. And then it also takes care of you on the back end as well. The agent explained to me that you're basically going from one country to another as you walk the gangway from, the Canada Place cruise terminal over to the cruise ship.
Do you then have to go through customs again when you come back, or is it like you're good?
No, only if you have to declare something. If you bought too much liquor, cigarettes, jewelry, or whatever, you have to declare it that way. But otherwise, you're good to go. The embarkation area, it was interesting because it's a little confusing how it's set up, because you go underground to the terminal. So if you're not careful, or if your driver doesn't know where he's going, like ours, he brought us down to the provisions level, which is very, very low. And we had to be one more up, and they dropped us off there. But everything is organized, and there's 3 different ships embarking at the same time. So everyone goes through the same security. Princess, Holland America, and Celebrity, who are all there on my day. Everyone goes through the same screening, customs, but then after that, you're kind of just let into this big area, and there are signs that said Celebrity Edge this way, the Princess ship, whatever it was, Sapphire or whatever, this way, and then Koningsdam this way. So you had to really make sure, because I started walking over to Celebrity Edge until I realized, I'm on the wrong side of the terminal. So my own fault for not reading this sign, because there's a lot of different ships in port, and it can be confusing if you're typically just expecting you go through security and only one ship being there,
Right. I think that's been my experience with every cruise that I've done is, you go to the terminal and the ship that you want is the only ship in port that day. So you don't really have to worry about it. I suppose they probably would have stopped you before you wandered onto the Celebrity Edge. Someone would have recognized them.
Yeah, I probably would have learned. You had to show your boarding pass or your phone like 3 times. So probably someone would have caught it eventually.
I want to ask you your first impression, but it's not really a true first impression because you've been on this ship before. Is that correct?
I was on it back in 2016 on the inaugural sailing. I'll be honest, it was 8 years ago, and it was one of those jet lag things, only on for a couple of days, so I don't remember much about that trip. But yeah, it is my second time on board, but really my first time as we're having this conversation, because it was all a blur, and I've been on dozens of ships since then.
All right, well then let's do it. First impressions when you walk on board. Now, I'm a big fan of Carnival Cruise Line ships that when you walk on, it makes an impression because you typically walk right into the atrium and it's like a little party going on. Holland America what is the layout there? Like, what do you walk into when you board the ship?
Yeah, so you walk onto deck 2, which is the middle level of the 3-story atrium. If you want to call it an atrium, there's a piece of artwork in the middle, and just like the steakhouses around it, the ocean bars around it. Not a lot there, but it would be considered an atrium, I guess you could call it, because it is multi-level, and you could see from deck to deck like you can on Carnival's main atriums, just nowhere as big. But you board on deck 2. We went up to deck number 3, which is where the guest services is, right when we boarded the ship. Yeah, it's very relaxing. And if you've been on Holland America before, or I should say if you haven't been on Holland America before, but been on like a Princess ship or a Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, nowhere near as extravagant as that. It's just a very subdued, just you walk on and there's the little atrium there and you go about your way. Either there's the 4 elevators there or take the stairs to your stateroom.
So Holland America has a little bit of a reputation of being sort of a little bit older skewing, a little bit stuffier, but they've also made efforts over the last couple of years to sort of combat that. And, in various areas, what did you find to be true of your fellow passengers?
Yeah, so my first time sailing Holland America was 2010 on the Eurodam, and that definitely would have been a true statement. This time, I believe the hotel director told us the average age was 62. So it was definitely skewed a lot younger than it did 14 years ago when I sailed Holland America for the first time in the Caribbean. That being said, there was barely any kids on board.
Well, you talked about the fact that there were fewer kids. Do you think that's because of it being an Alaska cruise, or do you think it's because this time, like Holland America, I would think if I'm taking kids on a cruise, I would probably want something where there's a lot of children's activities, and Holland America probably wouldn't be the first line I think of. Do you think that's why there were fewer kids?
I think it was just because it was still in early May and they're still in school at that point, because they do have a full-blown kids club on there on deck number 11. And I guarantee you right now, they have a bunch of kids on board as school's letting out, because you have to think though, it's also multi-generational. So you have the grandparents, which the line is known for, but they're also bringing their kids and their grandkids and sometimes their great-grandkids on board as well. So grandpa and grandma are bringing everyone on board for this nice family vacation. So they're gonna go everywhere from 8 months to 80 or 98 or whatever,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to my grandparents because they never took me on a cruise.
Right? Yeah,
and I feel like I really ripped off there. Let's make our way to your room. What kind of stateroom did you have, and what'd you think of it?
Yeah, so I was on deck 5 forward, and one thing I appreciated was all the outlets on board here. I don't recall there being USB-Cs, but they had the regular USB plugs, and there were one plug by each bed, as well as a plug on the vanity area, and also an outlet next to the bed. I think there were 5 outlets total in that cabin. Yeah.
I really love that about modern cruise lines, that they are, becoming more technologically prepared. I mean, like I'm getting ready in a couple of weeks to do the Queen Mary 2, and it's the exact opposite. Like there aren't plugs by the bedside. I'm not even sure if there's I mean, it is old school, so
right.
We have to find somewhere to plug things in. Let me ask you the all-important question: shower curtain or glass door?
Glass door, and oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this. So, I get sidetracked very easy. So we're in port one day, and I turn the shower on. Just got back on the ship, and I was going to hop in the shower before dinner. And my mom calls me, and usually like when mom calls me when I'm gone, something is going on, which it wasn't. She was just calling to check in. But I walked on my balcony, didn't realize I had the water running. Well, I had the shower door open, as the glass door, and also the bathroom door. Dude, I walked back into my cabin, and water was about to start overflowing, like where the commode and stuff is. It didn't get there yet, and the water from the shower head was basically spraying onto the mirror, the vanity mirror where the sink is, just making a freaking waterfall everywhere in there. I felt so embarrassed. I went straight to my cabin steward, and I'm like, I almost flooded my cabin. I didn't, but can I have a bunch of towels, and I will clean all of this up, I promise. Luckily, he's like, there's a drain in there. You're fine. And there was, but I still felt really bad. But Speaking of, being outside talking to Mom there, the balcony cabins are really spacious on this one. It felt a little bit larger than other balconies I've been on, and it was just your typical stateroom. It was nothing like extravagant or anything.
It's funny. I'm not going to lie. When you started that story and you're like, I was going to take a shower, and then my mom called and I walked out on the balcony, I was sure that this story was going to be, and you realized too late that you were naked and there was a ship parked next to you. I was sure that was where that story was going, because I actually did that once in Nassau.
Oh, geez.
So I was pretty sure that was where that was going, and I'm very happy for you that is not where it went.
Also, Richard, one other thing that really was nice here, because I'm a klutz, especially when I'm half asleep and getting up and going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. They have that sensor on the floor that as soon as your feet hit the floor, the little floor light turns on. So there's no more stubbing your toe or anything on the end of the bed or the drawer under the bed there. So that makes it a lot easier too. But overall, we had a couch in there, a vanity. It was just very nice. We did do one thing though. So you know how they have what do they call it? An ottoman? Yeah. So they have that. You can also put stuff inside of it. We actually took ours because it really felt like the cabin was crowded with it. And we put it sideways and put it into one of our lockers, one of the cabinets or closets, I guess, there, and kept it there the entire cruise. And it made things just a heck of a lot easier to navigate from the bed going out to the balcony.
Well, there's a very good tip, and I have to say I'm going to have to talk to somebody and have those little floor sensor night lights put into my bedroom. Because even at home, I have difficulty navigating from the bed to the bathroom at night. One of the things that I'm interested in here, this kind of itinerary. So most of the cruises that I've done have been mostly to the Caribbean. I've gone a few other places, but mostly to the Caribbean. When you go to Alaska, it is a much different trip because, first of all, I tend to be one of those travelers who doesn't care where the ship is going. I just want to be on a ship. But this is sort of more of a itinerary-driven, lots to see, lots to do kind of vacation, if you will. It's a little less stressful. I mean, a little more stressful than your typical relaxing vacation. So let's kind of run through the itinerary. You hit Juneau, Skagway, Glacier Bay, and Ketchikan. So let's start with, you went in early May. How was the weather for the week overall?
Anywhere from 60, which is actually nice. It was a little chilly during sail away. As we made our way north, like through the Inside Passage and up towards Juneau, I think Juneau, the high was 40. And then Skagway, the high was mid-30s because there was a chance of flurries that day. It never did snow. And then Ketchikan was also a little chilly. I would probably say the 50s. Glacier Bay, too, was also chilly. Glacier Bay was below freezing. So there was actually flurries that I caught on camera in Glacier Bay. So that was a really cool experience there. Woke up, it was like 27, I think. And I think it got to like 32, 33 Fahrenheit for the day. And then from that point, it just kind of hovered around there and went up a little bit as we went into Ketchikan. But if you're going early in the season or late this season, you can expect those cool days like that. Alaska does get into the 80s and 90s, though, in the summer, like in Juneau and Ketchikan. So you just have to kind of look at the weather because it is different every month you go up there, what those temps are.
I guess you kind of want cold weather because, you don't want the glaciers to completely melt. That's why I'm trying to go next year. I'm like, any day now, the climate will change so much that the glaciers will be completely gone. So get up there before it becomes the next Caribbean. Did you get to see some of them calving? Is that the right word, calving, when they break off?
It was so wild because you would hear, we were sitting on the balcony. I had my GoPro on there and I was doing a time lapse and I just heard like crack, crack, crack. And it sounded like lightning struck and thunder boomed. And then I heard, and I look and just this massive piece of ice just fell off of the glacier that we were passing. I think it was like Margaritaville Glacier. And it was the coolest thing ever. If you were really close to it, it could have probably flipped a small boat. The waves were that big because the waves came against the ship and we were like a mile and a half away. Another thing too, those glaciers are so massive. That one glacier, we were 6 miles away and it looked like not even a mile because they're so tall, so big.
Wow.
And then the other one really close as well. We were about a mile and a half from that one, but it still looked, I don't know if you saw my photos or anything, but it looked like we were right in front of it.
I'm going to guess that this is the kind of trip where it behooves you to have a balcony. I mean, like, yes, you can go up on the deck at any time and you can, there's plenty of deck space and all that, but it seems to me like this is the kind of trip where you want to be able to just sit on your own balcony and soak in that nature the entire trip.
I think so. I mean, you know this about me. I'm not really big on crowds. And I will say that, if you're up on, like, their big area is the crow's nest up on Holland America ships, which is the observation lounge at the very top of the ship forward above the navigational bridge. If it's a sea day, or if you're going into like Glacier Bay or something scenic, say there's whales or bears or mountain goats that they call out, everyone's up there and it's just so packed. If you have a balcony cabin, and when you're in Glacier Bay too, they actually spin the ship a couple of times, and the bow thrusters just spin it around in a big circle twice. So it doesn't matter which side of the ship you're on. If you have a balcony, you're going to see the glacier. And they did that with both glaciers. And of course, going into Glacier Bay, you get one side of one side, and going out, you get another side. So I would recommend getting a balcony for an Alaska cruise. That being said, though, it is a matter of budget too, because over the past couple of years, the Alaska rates have skyrocketed. They're finally starting to come down a little bit. I'm not sure if you pay like a premium for yours compared to the past times you've checked on Alaska or not, Richard, but...
Well, we actually did pay a premium because we wanted to make sure that wherever the site was, we had the ability to see it. Mm-hmm. So I'm traveling with my next door neighbor, and we actually booked Pinnacle suites on both sides of the aft. Nice. So the Pinnacle has wraparound balconies. Yeah. So her balcony, has like the back of the ship and then wraps around the left side. My balcony is at the aft of the ship and wraps around the right side. So we can just run back and forth and see whatever view we want to see on that particular. I really, for me personally, this is sort of a bucket list thing. I don't imagine going back to Alaska anytime soon. And I really wanted to spend the money wisely. I bought I bought a helicopter excursion, which was ridiculously expensive. And I bought the wraparound balconies because I really want to do this right. So yeah, I think for me, it's worth it on this particular trip. I wouldn't necessarily do it all the time because it is expensive, but we'll see.
It's definitely worth, it's one of those things where it is a bucket list trip. And I was actually talking to a couple, or actually a family from Kentucky. They said, this is a one and done trip for us. So we have went all out with the excursions. They were doing the helicopters, the seaplanes, the crab feasts. They're like, it was a pretty penny, but it's a one and done thing for us. And we decided just to go all in.
That's exactly how I feel. Let's do a quick rundown of sort of each of the ports and what your highlight in that port was. So your first port was Juneau.
Mm-hmm. Juneau, it poured down rain in Juneau all day long, and I kept hoping that it was going to stop. And it never did. I did get off the ship, though, because I have to, at least just get off. I went to Tracy's Crab Shack. There was 5 ships in port in Juneau, and it was like around 7 o'clock. We were going to have dinner there in the line. It was a 3-hour wait, and people were waiting in the pouring rain. Like, this is how people love this place so much. They're willing to wait in the pouring rain for this. I'm like, I don't like king crab that much that I'm going to sit out here.
No, I'll go to Red Lobster when I get home.
So we went and recorded my news briefs in the parking garage where we got some shelter. And then we went to the Alaska Brewing Company, which actually has the same crabs as Tracy's. They get it from the same place, they told us, and it was the same exact price. So we went there instead. Then went to the Red Dog Saloon. Have you seen much of that, Richard, when you were researching Alaska?
Is that the one that has the duck farts?
Yeah, it's one of them. They all do up there. It's kind of a gimmicky thing, but it's like an old school saloon with live bands in there and sawdust on the floor, and not bad drink prices either. Like a beer was like $4 or $5, and
wow.
I think vodka soda was like $7, which is unheard of. Any port you ever go to, you're paying at least double for each one of those. Yeah, and our all aboard was around 10 o'clock, so we got back on the ship around 9:30 or so, and then kind of wrapped up our day there.
Well, you bring up a good point, and I'm sure this is going to continue through the next couple of port calls, but one of the things you and I have talked about, and we've written about quite a bit, is over-tourism. Alaska, over the last couple of years, has become the place to go. There are more ships than ever sailing there. And it's become, it's gotten to the point where some of the communities are starting to look at limiting the number of ships that can go there. Is it as crowded as it sounds when you go to these ports because of how many ships are going?
In Ketchikan and Juneau, absolutely. It was, I'm not going to say miserable because I did have a good time at both ports, But it was very frustrating at times trying to navigate, especially around the pier, where it felt like you were in a really packed Lido deck marketplace or something on a cruise ship at times. And I just wanted to walk as far away as I can. And I walked along the main street just to kind of get away because we had 5 ships in port in Juneau. Actually, that was Ketchikan. There were 5. As we were having lunch in Ketchikan, ships started leaving. I think the Celebrity ship left, and then the Viking ship left, and then I think Holland America's Eurodam. So by the time we were done with lunch, all the ships were gone except us and one other one. It was actually pleasant there where we could go into the stores and buy the smoked salmon and the tchotchkes and all that stuff.
So that's actually a really good tip, is when you are planning your trip, there's so many things you have to take into consideration, of course. But one thing to look at is you can easily look up how many other ships are going to be in port. You can also look up what hours they're going to be there. And you might sort of look at that and say, oh, well, this line stays later. And that could help you decide on an itinerary that lets you have more time in the ports as well as times that are less crowded. So that's actually a really good tip. Now, let's move on to our next stop, which was Skagway.
Yeah, so Skagway, I did the White Pass Railroad. And at first, I wasn't excited about this because I did it because my buddy Ben was like, you have to do it at least once. And I've been to Skagway. This is my 3rd time there, and I haven't done it yet. So I'm like, I'm going to check it out. Okay. And it was like $119. But you board the train and you go up to the White Pass summit. You see the wildlife. Right around the summit, we saw a bear playing in the snow right next to the train tracks. The ride was cool, too, because you can go outside. It was a guy on a microphone, and he didn't speak that often. He just pointed out the spots. But there was also a person walking back and forth through the train who was answering questions that we may have that maybe the guy didn't answer, or if you had something additional to ask. But it was only a 3-hour total excursion. And I was very glad. At first, I boarded the train. We were in the very front train, the very front row. And I'm like, this is going to be miserable. It wasn't at all. I shouldn't have packed on that negative attitude because it was so awesome. It only took probably 15 minutes of pulling out and starting to make that, ascent up the hill there to see the sights and the cruise ships from very high in the snow, and you're plowing through this snow that's 7-foot embankments on each side of you when we were there in mid-May. It was a really good excursion. If you haven't done the White Pass Summit Railroad, there's different ones. You can do the fancy private car if you want, or you can just do the regular, it's like $119, I think, for our sailing. One other cool thing about these carts, too, is that you can't go from train to train while they're moving, even though that there is a little walkway, but you can go to the front or back of your cart. There's 2 benches up there and a big platform where you can actually go outside and sit there and take in the fresh air. Or if it's too chilly for you, you can stay there in your seat as well in the cabin. And each car has a bathroom in it as well. So that makes it a lot easier, too.
It probably won't surprise you to hear that we not only booked that, but we were like, ooh, there's a fancy car. Let's get the fancy cars. So I will be able to report on next year on what life is like in the fancy car. I'm very excited about that. So after Skagway comes Glacier Bay. Now, I will admit I am a little confused. They list Glacier Bay as a port, but it's not really, right? It's like you're sailing through an area. Is that correct?
It's listed as a port, but it should be, I think some places, some literature says scenic cruising, and that's what it is. You enter Glacier Bay around 7 o'clock. You take on the local ranger, and then you go into Glacier Bay, go to 2 glaciers. A naturalist is up on the deck over the microphone as well. So it's not coming into your cabins, but if you want to listen to them, you can turn the TV on to a certain channel, and everything that they have a bow cam, and everything that the naturalist is saying, who is live up in the crow's nest, being broadcasted into your cabin. Man, I've been to Glacier Bay a couple of times and a couple of other fjords up there, like Endicott and Dawes Glacier. And I just have to say, man, I don't know what it is, but I really have a deep appreciation. I guess maybe it's just my age or getting older or whatever, but I just really felt in the moment at this certain time in Glacier Bay. It is like one of the coolest things. And I've said it so many times, and I'm going to say it again about the whole, living in a postcard. I just said it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just one of those things where you're sitting there and you're like, look at this stuff all around me. I feel this big in the world. I feel like an ant out here right now. And you have the sea otters next to you, and they're on their backs just flapping around in the water. There was an orca that made its way up there. We saw a bunch of other whales, mountain goats. We saw 2 bears on the shore. It was just such a wild experience. And we had beautiful weather too. It was a little cloudy to start the day, but by the end of the day, we just couldn't get enough photos. And I was looking at when I got home, looking at my GoPro footage, where my GoPro has a magnet on it. So I put it like on my balcony as we spun around and everything. And it's unreal how beautiful it was that day. So it's one of those things where, for one, if you're really into nature and you want to get your own little private space, like your own section of real estate, book a balcony cabin if you're going into one of these bays, especially to see the glaciers. But also just the people, the literature. They have the National Park Guide in your cabin the night before, so you can read through it to see what your day is going to be like. You spend 8 hours in the actual day itself, and they only allow like 1 ship at a time in the space. So like as we were leaving, Discovery Princess was coming in. So that was cool as well to see, like, people they're really trying to limit traffic, and also probably the noise pollution and regular pollution and everything from ships to go up into these like pristine spots, because they are amazing, man.
I feel like if this segment of the show was on Instagram, it would have like #gratitude. As you know, I live in Woodstock, New York, and it's at the foot of the Catskill Mountains and in the Hudson Valley. And there are times when I just walk outside and am filled with a sense of appreciation that I never really had before. So really looking forward to experiencing that in Alaska. There are so many things that I don't really know or understand about Alaska, and there are myths and legends. And is Alaska a place where it's bright 24 hours a day? Is that right?
It depends on how high up you go, and also it depends on what time of year. So like in June in northern Alaska, you're going to have like 20 hours of daylight / dusk. The hotels in Fairbanks, Alaska, like if you're doing like Denali or anything, they have blackout curtains in them. We were at a bar. We walked out of the bar. We went in like around 10 o'clock and it was daylight. We walked out at 2, still daylight, 2 a.m. I'm like, okay, this is a mind freak right here, because you're going in
wild. That gives day drinking a whole new meaning.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it depends on the time of year.
How was it on this particular cruise, on this particular time of year, on this particular itinerary?
Yeah, the sun set around 10 o'clock every night.
Okay, not bad. Your next stop is Ketchikan, and I believe Ketchikan was another place that was kind of crowded, right?
Yeah, it was very crowded in Ketchikan. We did just, love me the king crab. I will say that much. So we went to a place called the Alaska King Crab Company. It was on the 3rd deck on the top of like a souvenir shop and something else. And it wasn't crowded at all. I thought the restaurant was going to be crowded, but they don't do a good job of letting people know exactly where they're located, which is very bizarre, especially their prices they're charging. But we had king crab there and like crab chowder. And then my buddy had this king crab Bloody Mary, which was just, it was wild. It was like this crab this big goblet, this Bloody Mary, and then it had like these 2 giant king crab legs coming out of it. I'm like, this is freaking insane, man. And you pay for every cent of that as well, every ounce. But
that sounds like the best thing since they started putting bacon in Bloody Mary.
Yeah. And I didn't have any of it, but not really my thing, but it looked just, at least from aesthetics, it looked freaking amazing. And it's like 35 or $40.
Okay. So after you ate in Ketchikan, did you do anything else?
We walked down to Creek Street. That's where, a lot of history through there, and that Miss Dolly's little place there, who was like the madam of Creek Street back in the day. Was looking for the salmon, but it was a little too early for them to start running, so we didn't see anything wild. I've been on Creek Street in August and September before. The salmon were could barely, it felt like the cruise passengers at the pier. They were just so tight next to each other, taking the fish ladders or trying to swim up the waterfalls a little up creek a little bit. Not this time. I think I saw 1 fish. I don't even think it was a salmon though. And I got back on the ship probably around 4 or 5 o'clock, and I think we left like around 6 o'clock.
So on this particular trip, you don't have a lot of sea days, right? Like maybe 1? Is that right?
Day 1 is cruising the Inside Passage, and that takes you up to Juneau. So that's a sea day. From Vancouver to Juneau is a sea day. The very last day, when you leave Ketchikan and go back to Vancouver, you're cruising the Inside Passage again, and that's also a sea day. So you have 2 sea days, but realistically, You have 3 if you want to count the scenic cruising in Glacier Bay, because it is nonstop. If you want to learn and you want to know about the nature and the bears and all of this, between the viewing opportunities and the lectures they have on board that day, it is a full day. But you could also, if you're not into that, it's a third sea day.
All right. Well, now let's talk about the most important thing of all, which is the food. One of the things I'm kind of into here is Holland America just rolled out this new program with fresh fish and sort of sourcing it from the ports, so that, as I understand it, it's basically like 48 hours, within 48 hours of this fish having been caught, it's on your plate. And I know that you're kind of into seafood, so I'm guessing that was good.
They had this thing they were saying on board, dock to plate in 48. So if it says, sustainable fish on there, that means that they loaded it this port or the last port, and you're actually going to have it within 48 hours. In some places, like in Juneau, Alaska, I think it's called Taku Fisheries. It's like 500 yards away from the ship. The salmon never leaves the side of the ship. You could walk to the fishery in probably 15 minutes. So I will say this, born and raised on the coast, my family had shrimp boats and fishing boats, had fresh seafood my entire life. And this is like legit. I was skeptical at best because, we always, everyone's rolling out the next best big thing or whatever. And not that this is huge or anything, but if you're a seafood lover, it's pretty good because you are getting, it's pulled from the sea within a couple of days. It's not like Chilean sea bass that's been locked up in the freezer for, 6 weeks or whatever, and they're pulling out a fillet to grill it up for you, or frying a piece of catfish that's been in there for a while. This is like legit. The crab was legit, halibut, the salmon, and that extended from the main dining room, the Alaska Sea Day brunch, and also the Lido Marketplace up at the top there, which is a selection of your typical Lido, but they serve you. So you're not serving yourself. Probably from midship to the back of the ship is the Lido Marketplace. I think they call it the World Marketplace. And there's just different stations. There's an Italian station, an Asian fusion station, a dessert station, salad, burgers, things like that. That's good. And I never really felt like it was way too crowded, because you also have like the dive-in burgers outside by the pool. And the opposite of that, you have the New York Deli, the pizza up there that they make to order pizzas. You have options. You could also go down to the main dining room as well. So they do spread you out that way, which is a good thing, because I will say that if there was no dive-in, there was no New York Deli or like no brunch on a sea day, it would be a hot mess up there in the World Marketplace.
Well, let me ask you this: Fresh Seafood Initiative. First of all, they should put that slogan on. They should have it like cross stitched on pillows, because that's a good slogan. Did you hit any of the specialty restaurants?
We did the Pinnacle Grill, which is the steakhouse, and that is, I believe it was $42. And that was good. Always a solid meal. That's where they have I think we were talking about it before, the candied bacon that hangs from the hooks that they bring to your table. Like they give you like 4 pieces each and a little side order of pickles and some baby tongs to pull it off with. So a couple of us ordered that. And so we demolished that, and a good little Alaskan, was it baked Alaska? They had that with Ben and Jerry's ice cream and a nice steak, a nice cut there. Yeah, it was a great experience. And so was Tamarind, which is the Asian fusion place.
Yes.
Always solid, great selection there. I had the seared lobster. Wok seared lobster, and so good. It brought out a ton of sides, like the green beans and the rice and so much stuff. But I was just, give you so much, and I couldn't eat all of it. But it was family style, right? So everyone was kind of picking at the sides. That was really good as well. That was in the $40 range.
Well, a little tip about Tamarind as well is, a lot of people never even step foot in there if they're not going to go to the specialty restaurant, but they have a great little bar in there with like sakis and stuff like that. And it's usually very quiet because, like I said, people don't necessarily know about it. There's also seating areas in there that you don't have to necessarily be having dinner in there, but you can go in and enjoy. It's a great little place to hang out. This is coming from someone who's never been there, but who has been doing a lot of research and is dying because I know that Tamarind is going to be like one of the places where I hang out a lot. Activity wise on board, I mean, this is Holland America, and they're pretty well known for their music, right? They have music walk on this ship. Is that right?
Yeah. So they have music walk, which is on deck number 2. So what they have is they have the BB King's Blues Club, which is really, really super popular. They have like 3 or 4 sets a night. And then as you keep walking forward, you have Billboard on board over on your left side. That's going to be dueling pianos. And then you have the Rolling Stone Lounge, which is just rock. And every night they have different decades, 80s, 90s, 2000s, country, or whatever. They have different themes that they constantly rotate about 3 or 4 sets a night as well. That space is one of the best things they've ever rolled out, Music Walk, because it brings people out there until the wee hours of the morning. I like to work at night when I'm traveling, and I couldn't find a quiet place anywhere on deck number 2 because the music was just cranking and the people were eating it up. So I would always go to the top to the crow's nest. Yeah. Other shows on the ship, of course, you have the world stage up front. They have a lot of stage shows on there and singers and everything.
Which I know you love.
Yeah, I sat through one.
One thing that kind of surprised me, if I'm not mistaken, they have sort of done away with the Lincoln Center partnership and program, which I always assumed, given that they kind of cater historically to an older crowd, I always assumed Lincoln Center programs would be wildly popular. But it seems like they've kind of cut that either down or out, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. They turned that into, well, there's a piano in there. There are things in that space. There is music there. But it's more of like just the occasional piano player or maybe a trio or whatnot. I never walked through when they were actually performing, but I did see equipment in there. At times when I did walk through, like during the day, there were things there as well. One other thing I was going to hit on too, the casino does allow smoking. You can tell that it's a smoking casino, but there is an annex as well, a non-smoking casino with maybe 30 slots in there. No tables, like 30 slot machines in the non-smoking casino. And that is like just before you get to the main casino off on the side. You can walk in there if you want a non-smoking experience. Better selection, better games in the smoking casino. But if you're very sensitive, I can see where it would get overwhelming to some people.
Okay, well, I feel like we've hit a lot of stuff here. You sail back to Vancouver. How did disembarkation go?
Debark was easy. I was waiting for my friend's family to be called. So they were called, like they said, between 8:20 and 8:30, and they called them right at 8:20 on the dot. And I just walked off with them. They checked their bags. I was rolling mine off. We were in the curb, probably shipped the curb in 10 minutes. Vancouver gets a lot of it being a hot mess type thing. And maybe they fixed it since all of that. But I've even had people like recently comment, I don't know how you're sailing out of Vancouver. It's a horrible embark and debark experience. I didn't have that issue. And even my buddy Ben didn't have it with his family, who had 5 bags checked.
Any tips, final thoughts, that kind of thing? And in this case, I'm speaking directly from you to me because I'm doing this trip in a year and I'm very excited about it. So hit me with your thoughts and tips.
Be mindful of what you pack. One thing I actually did was I went to Sherry Griffith's Cruise Tips TV channel, and her Alaska packing tips video is solid. It's on point. I think she's been there like 4 times at this point, so it's really good there. Plan your excursions. They do sell out. The train ride, I was very late to booking that because I just didn't know if I was going to like it. I'm glad I booked it. Book it early. I was on a wait list and I was like, got the notification, you're selected. So I was able to book it because of that. Book a balcony if you can afford it. If you can't, at least an ocean view.
Or make a friend with a balcony.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%. I didn't even think about that one. And
I will also say, I just want to add on to when you said, book your excursions early. When Doug says early, he means as early as possible, because I will tell you, we are doing this cruise in May of 2025, my neighbor and I, and there were 2 excursions that are already sold out. So, the moment you're going on an Alaska cruise, and this is not just true of Holland America, like Doug said, this is a bucket list cruise for a lot of people. and so they go all out. And that means if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get that helicopter excursion until closer because I want to save the money and it's going to be really expensive. No, book that crap now because there is a good chance it will sell out if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too. I didn't even think about and what you just said about the amount of ships, people in Alaska, and these, a lot of these companies, they share the same tour operators, so they only have limited capacity. So yeah, you're just one ship out of maybe 4 or 5 that are in port that day. So you want to book as early as you can, because don't wait and mess around till last minute, because I've done that twice this year and I got burnt once. That's about it, man. I appreciate you doing this.
I love doing it. Like I said, going next year. If you are even thinking about booking an Alaska trip, there is lots of good information on the site. There's lots of good information out there. And I'm a big believer that, don't put it off. Do it now because, the glaciers aren't getting any bigger. So get out there and enjoy it while you can.
Absolutely. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, I appreciate it, buddy.
Glad to be here.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,